So we had already talked about this last night, but in the Vancouver Canucks 5-2 win over the Nashville Predators, he had an interesting storyline come about towards the end of the second period. Canucks forward JT Miller was benched for the final few minutes, because earlier in the game he had 3 separate minor infractions, resulting in a total of 6 minutes in the penalty box. 4 of these minutes were gathered in the same play, 2 of them for hooking and then the other 2 for unsportsmanlike, probably because he was yelling at the refs. And then in the second period, Miller had another call, this time for high sticking on Roman Josi. Miller spent some time in the box, and at the end of the second, we saw Rick Tocchet pretty much give Miller a sit-down saying, hey, that type of behavior is not acceptable. The Canucks didn't play him on the power play towards the end of the second period. He was reduced to opening the bench for his teammates. And the second period ended off with all of us buzzing around on social media saying, hey, look at that, Tocchet has benched JT Miller, one of the best players on the team. What a message being sent there on how this team is not going to tolerate that. Nice going, Rick Tocchet. And to make things even better, at the start of the third period, guess what? It's JT Miller's line that goes out there and starts. Miller gets the opening draw. He then scores a goal later on. So there you go. Big bounce back for JT. And you had Rick Tocchet at the end of the night say this to the media. JT Miller has played unreal hockey for me. I felt that he needed to sit for 4 minutes. It's accountability, and he responds with a goal. He's fine. He said that Miller and him, they both apologized to one another during the intermission as well. And the explanation for that is underneath, they apologized to each other. Miller because he briefly lost his composure, and Tocchet because it sucks to get taken out of the rotation. What I also wanted to do was read a comment made on the Canucks subreddit. This is what Ecstatic Buy went out there and said about the situation. Tocchet for Coach of the Year. Wheel it into existence. Sends a message to one of our best players with no hard feelings. Gives him a chance to redeem himself in the third. I love it. Tocchet is the perfect coach for JT Miller. Their games match stylistically, and Miller needs that stern but fair, tough love to keep his emotions in check when things start getting heated. He's really taken his game to another level this year. However, after the game was over, you had yourselves the Canucks media waiting around and seeing if JT Miller would be available for comment. This was a really good story of him getting benched and responding back with a goal, so the media members obviously wanted to hear what went on in Miller's mind. However, Miller did not end up going to the podium. And there was some conflicting idea as to whether or not it was the Canucks' decision themselves to not send Miller out, or if it was Miller's decision to not go out and speak to the media afterwards, but this is what Daniel Wagner went out there and said about the situation. I've seen a lot of Canucks fans making excuses for JT Miller dodging the media last night after a game where he was one of the major stories. I'll be blunt, this type of thing is exactly why he wasn't chosen as captain. The standard reply to this is to say, no one cares about media access, but it's not about the media. It's about the fans. I think a lot of fans want to know what Miller thought about getting benched, which was a major part of the story of last night's game. In my view, this was a great opportunity for Miller to embrace the Canucks' new culture of accountability and to show the fans that he's fully bought in. No ego, all for the team. I don't doubt that he is bought in, mind you, but it was a missed opportunity for that message. And for those saying, the Canucks are winning, who cares about this? Do you know what would have made this not a story at all? Miller coming out and talking to the media for 5 minutes last night. He's having a great season. After he was benched, he came back and scored a big goal. This was an entirely positive story, and it would have been an even better story if fans could have heard from Miller himself. That's all. Now, Wags has a few other things in this thread here. The reply from Rafi says this whole face the media thing has gone too far. Wags then replies saying that the locker room, has been open to the media for decades. It's only in recent years that the Canucks have limited the players available. And you gotta remember that that actually was true. Like, remember the scrums before with, like, the Shane O'Briens and the Biexas and the Luongos and everybody, where media members would just be in the main room and being able to talk to whoever it is that they want. They'd have their microphones, they'd be going up to different players and getting interviews. That's how it used to be. Now it's not like that. Ever since COVID came around and media player interviews were restricted, the Canucks have seemed to incorporate that style and that procedure into their modern day treatment of media interviews and accessibility. So it's tough if you don't get to see the guys that you want to interview, but JT Miller was one that a lot of the media members yesterday wanted to see. Steve then replies, "I heard that JT wasn't made available, quote-unquote, to the media, which led me to believe that someone with the Canucks asked him not to speak to you guys. Wag says I was there. The Canucks communication staff attempted to get him for the media multiple times. We were told he was receiving treatment at first." And so, if the Canucks guys themselves, like the Canucks communications workers, were telling the interviewers, all the guys with the microphones, "Hey, we're trying to get Miller. He's in the locker room right now. He's receiving treatment. We're going to try to get him on the podium here," and Miller eventually just doesn't go, it doesn't definitively conclude in my mind that, oh yeah, Miller straight up dodged it, but it really doesn't look good at the same time. You know, like, it would be one thing if the Canucks communication staff completely fumbled the bag and just waited until Miller's receiving treatment was over and then they missed him as he was walking out. But it's another thing if they straight up told him, "Hey, the media wants to talk to you. The media's got all these questions. They want to hear your comments about the benching and then the goal. It's a great story, whatever." And then Miller just doesn't show up afterwards. Those are two completely separate things. And if it's more so the latter which occurred, which I want to say is more believable, I don't know. It's kind of like tough to fully conclude one way or the other, but it's tough to believe that the Canucks communication staff would mess up in not being able to get the guy that they wanted to get interviewed. So with this idea in mind, it becomes a little interesting to start thinking about how JT Miller, sure, he might fully buy into what it is the Canucks are doing. He agrees with Rick Tocchet and the benching. He agrees with the situation. He agrees with the mindset and the ideas that a benching of his would enforce upon this team. But to not go out there and speak publicly to the media after being asked about it multiple times, that shows a pretty interesting type of dynamic that I don't think really would be suited for the captaincy. Like, it's a weird train of thought to go down, but I think Wags is on the right track here. And maybe it's a nitpicky thing to say. Maybe it's fair to say, hey, wait a minute, like, Miller isn't the captain. So why is it his responsibility to go out there and do this type of a thing now? Especially after everything was said and done, he already got benched, he already scored the goal, it's whatever. Why should Miller have to care about what it is that the fans appreciate or what the media wants? And at the end of the day, that's a fair perspective. He doesn't have to care about that stuff. He doesn't. He's fully within his right to ignore all media interviews and all fan sentiments. But at the end of the day, as a guy on the leadership group of a hockey team, there is a certain level of responsibility that carries over beyond just the ice itself. That includes speaking to the fans, that includes speaking to the media. We've seen guys like Quinn Hughes really step up in that respect. He took the mic last season at the end of the year. He has been outspoken in all his interviews ever since. And Quinn has really embraced being that captain, which I think bodes very well with that decision. Henrik Sedin beforehand was always out there answering questions, answering the tough ones. Remember when the Canucks got eliminated from the finals in 2011? Both Henrik and Daniel remained for quite an extended amount of time afterwards, answering all the questions the media needed. That is what they do. That is what the face of a hockey team goes out there and does. That is what prime leadership quality players on a squad end up doing. They serve causes not just on the ice themselves, also contributing to the community sentiments and what the media is asking for. And so at the end of the day, this JT Miller thing, obviously the next time Miller is going to get interviewed, whenever that may be, for the San Jose game, whatever, like, they're going to ask him about that. He's not going to find a way to escape this question forever. I mean, the guy's signed on in Vancouver till 2030. It's bound to come up in some conversation or another. But at the end of the day, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section. How do you feel about Wagner's type of assessment here? How the Miller dodging of the benching situation last night is an indicator as to why Miller was not given that captaincy. It's a big conclusion, but I think it makes sense. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.